It was a quiet evening in a small suburban neighborhood. The sun had just started to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped softly, and the gentle hum of distant traffic made everything feel peaceful. John, a middle-aged man with a kind face, sat in his living room, holding a cup of tea. His wife, Sarah, paralyzed from a terrible accident a few years ago, was in her wheelchair nearby, smiling faintly as she watched the sunset from the window. Life had never been easy for them. After Sarah's accident, John had become her full-time caregiver. He loved her deeply, but every day was a struggle, helping her with simple tasks, worrying about her health, and trying to keep some normalcy in their lives. Despite everything, their small home was filled with love and quiet happiness. But in this peaceful neighborhood, not everyone shared that happiness. HOA Karen, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a controlling personality, ruled the community like a queen. She had a reputation for being overbearing and difficult. If a neighbor left a lawn mower slightly out of place or didn't trim their hedges exactly to her liking, she would complain. Some called her the neighborhood tyrant, and most residents did their best to avoid her. John and Sarah had tried to keep a low profile. They followed all the rules, kept their house tidy, and rarely interacted with Karen. But sometimes, John couldn't help noticing how Karen's son, Kevin, always seemed to be watching them. Kevin was a young man in his 20s, tall and athletic, but with a cold look in his eyes that made people uncomfortable. He never smiled, and whenever he passed by John and Sarah, it felt like he was measuring them, judging them. That evening, John felt a strange chill as he sipped his tea. Something about the quiet air felt different. Maybe it was the way the wind rustled the trees outside, or maybe it was just his imagination. But deep down, he had a feeling that this evening would not be like the others. Sarah noticed it too. She turned her head slightly, her eyes narrowing. "John, did you hear that?" she asked softly. John shook his head. "Hear what, love?" "It's just the wind." But Sarah didn't look convinced. She had always been sensitive to people's moods and the energy around them. Her intuition had saved them from trouble before. As they sat there, the peaceful silence was broken by a sudden knock on the front door. It was loud and sharp, echoing through the house. John froze, his heart skipping a beat. At this hour, who could it be? Their neighbors were all inside their homes, and the streets were empty. John cautiously stood up, setting his tea down, and slowly walked toward the door. He peeked through the small window next to it. It was Kevin. John's stomach twisted. Why was he here? Karen's son had never come to their house uninvited. And there was something in his eyes, something dark, almost dangerous. "Good evening, Kevin," John said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Is everything okay?" Kevin didn't answer right away. He just stared at John for a long moment. Then, without warning, he knocked again, harder this time. Just let me get the door," John muttered, his hands shaking slightly. He hesitated for a split second, but then unlocked the door and opened it. Kevin stepped inside before John could say anything. His presence filled the room with tension. Sarah instinctively moved back in her wheelchair, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you want, Kevin?" John asked, trying to sound firm despite the fear rising in his chest. Kevin didn't speak at first. He just looked at Sarah, and a cold, unreadable expression crossed his face. Then he finally said, "I'm here because you shouldn't have crossed my mother." John frowned. I don't know what you mean. We've never done anything wrong." Kevin smirked, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made John's blood run cold. "Oh, you think staying out of her way is enough? You don't know my mother, or me. We don't forgive. We don't forget." Sarah tried to speak, but her voice was weak. "John, please, don't let him near me." John felt panic rising in his chest. He stepped in front of her wheelchair, trying to block Kevin. But Kevin seemed to enjoy this tension, watching John carefully, like a predator observing its prey. Just then, Kevin made a sudden move toward them. John's heart pounded, and for a moment, he feared the worst. He tried to grab Kevin's arm, But Kevin pulled back and laughed, a cold, empty laugh that sent shivers down John's spine. "I'm warning you," John said, his voice trembling. "Stay away from us." Kevin's eyes flicked toward the window. "You'll regret ignoring us. My mother doesn't like it when people ignore her, or her rules." Before John could respond, Kevin turned on his heel and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold, his hand on the doorknob. "This isn't over," he said. "You'll see. Very soon." Then he left, slamming the door behind him. The house was silent again. John and Sarah looked at each other, both terrified and confused. They had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a promise. John sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "Sarah, what's going on with them? Why are they doing this?" Sarah could only shake her head. "I don't know, but I have a bad feeling, John. Something terrible is coming." Outside, the sun had disappeared completely, and the neighborhood was bathed in shadows. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling sense of danger. For the first time in years, John realized that their peaceful life might be over. And in the distance, through the quiet streets, the sound of Kevin's footsteps faded, but not before leaving a chilling reminder: someone was watching, waiting, and planning something that would change their lives forever. Little did they know, this was only the beginning. The calm had ended. The storm was coming. The night had grown darker than usual. Streetlights flickered weakly, and a cold wind whispered through the trees outside John and Sarah's home. After Kevin's ominous visit earlier that evening, neither John nor Sarah could sleep. The air in the house felt heavy, like something unseen was lurking just beyond the walls. John sat beside Sarah, holding her hand tightly. Her breathing was shallow, and he could see the fear in her eyes. "We'll be fine, Sarah," he whispered, trying to convince himself as much as her. "He's gone for now. Nothing will happen tonight." But deep down, John knew that was a lie. The feeling of unease was too strong. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, made him jump. And then, he heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible, came from the back door. It was the quietest creak, like someone was testing the latch. John froze. He slowly put down Sarah's hand and rose, moving toward the door with careful, measured steps. "Who's there?" he called softly, hoping for a simple explanation, maybe a raccoon, or a branch brushing the door. But no answer came, only silence. Then, suddenly, the door handle rattled. Not a knock. A deliberate, forceful jostle, as if someone wanted in. John's heart pounded in his chest. "Stay calm, Sarah." "Stay calm," he muttered to himself, though his hands were trembling. He looked around for something, anything, to defend them. His eyes landed on a heavy flashlight on the table. He grabbed it and edged toward the door. The door burst open. Kevin stood there, his expression colder and darker than ever. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another man, someone John had never seen before, slipped in silently behind him. Both of them moved like shadows, fluid and precise, and the room suddenly felt impossibly small. "Get away from her!" John shouted, swinging the flashlight. Kevin laughed, a sound so cruel it made Sarah flinch. "You should have listened," Kevin said. "Rules are rules. My mother doesn't forgive mistakes." Before John could react further, a sharp, deafening sound rang out. A bullet shattered the lamp behind them, sending shards of glass flying. Sarah screamed, and John's heart stopped. He rushed to her side, trying to shield her. But the next moment, Kevin's figure blurred in the dim light, and a second shot rang out. Sarah collapsed in her wheelchair, her eyes wide with shock and pain. John's hands trembled violently as he tried to hold her, to stop the chaos around them. His mind raced, unable to process what had just happened. The impossible was real. Kevin had attacked them, and somehow, he had aimed directly at Sarah. The intruder behind him grabbed John roughly, shoving him away from Sarah. John fought back, adrenaline surging, but it felt like fighting a ghost. Kevin's laugh echoed in his ears, chilling him to the bone. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the front of the house. A neighbor had heard the shots and called 911. The sound of sirens approached, distant but growing louder. Kevin hesitated, as if calculating his next move. Then, almost casually, he backed toward the door. "You'll see us again," he whispered, his voice ice-cold. "And next time, it will be worse." He and his accomplice vanished into the night, leaving John and Sarah alone amidst broken glass, overturned chairs, and fear that seemed to cling to every corner. John clutched Sarah's trembling hand. "Stay with me, Sarah. Please, stay with me." The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, and soon police cars pulled up in front of the house. Officers rushed inside, calling for John to step back. Paramedics hurried to Sarah, lifting her onto a stretcher with gentle urgency. John followed, panic choking him with every step. But even as she was taken away in the ambulance, John noticed something that made his blood run cold. A small note had been left on the doorstep, written in neat, cruel handwriting. "This is only the beginning. The rules will be enforced." John's hands shook so badly that he could barely hold the door open. He realized that Kevin's attack wasn't random. It was personal. Planned. Calculated. And if they thought this was over, they were wrong. The ambulance drove away, its lights cutting through the dark streets like a knife. John ran beside it for a moment, screaming Sarah's name, but there was nothing he could do except pray she would survive. Back in the house, the police began their investigation. They asked questions, took notes, and reassured John that they would find Kevin and his accomplice. But John knew in his heart that this was more than just a criminal act, it was a message. A warning. And if they didn't act fast, the worst was yet to come. As the night stretched on, John sat in the wrecked living room, staring at the note on the floor. The words seemed to echo endlessly, "The rules will be enforced." He had no idea what they meant, but he knew one thing for certain: their life, their peace, and Sarah's very survival hung by a thread. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again, but the darkness no longer felt safe. Somewhere, Kevin and his accomplice were watching, waiting, and planning their next move. And John realized, with a sinking feeling in his chest, that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the attack, the neighborhood felt like a ghost town. Sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds of John and Sarah's shattered home, casting long shadows over broken furniture and shattered glass. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the kitchen, a small reminder of the ordinary life that had been ripped away in one night. John sat beside Sarah's empty wheelchair, his head in his hands. The previous night's events replayed in his mind like a cruel movie: Kevin's cold eyes, the gunshots, Sarah's terrified scream. His chest tightened every time he thought about her fragile body lying in the hospital. For the first time, John felt the weight of helplessness. The sound of tires outside made him jump. Several black SUVs pulled up to the house, and men in suits stepped out, their badges glinting in the sunlight. FBI. Real, serious FBI. John's heart pounded. He had heard of the FBI investigating high-profile crimes, but never imagined they would appear at his doorstep. One of the agents, a tall woman with sharp eyes, approached. "Mr. Daniels," she asked. "We're here regarding last night's incident." "Yes," John replied, his voice trembling. It was Kevin. Karen's son. The agent held up her hand. "We know. That's why we're here. You're not alone in this. But we need to ask questions. Everything you remember, every detail, even the smallest, matters." John nodded, trying to steady his shaking hands. "I'll tell you everything. I promise." While John spoke, another agent examined the house, photographing broken lamps, bullet holes, and the small note left on the doorstep: "This is only the beginning. The rules will be enforced." "Karen's family has a history," the tall agent whispered to a colleague. "We've had previous complaints about threats, harassment, but this escalated far beyond what anyone expected." John overheard this and froze. History? What history? He had never known about any previous attacks. His mind raced. How could someone like Karen and her son have gotten away with this for so long? Back at the hospital, John sat beside Sarah's bed. Machines beeped softly, monitoring her fragile condition. She was unconscious, her face pale, her body battered. Doctors had assured him she was stable, but stable wasn't enough. Not after what Kevin had done. An FBI agent entered, holding a folder. "Mr. Daniels, we need you to be completely honest. Did Kevin act alone? Did he have help? Anything unusual in your interactions with the HOA, Karen, or her son?" John hesitated. He wanted to scream, to cry, to demand justice, but he also knew the truth was stranger than anything he could imagine. I don't know if he acted alone," he admitted. "Kevin, he was always watching. But my wife and I we never did anything to them. I just don't understand why." The agent nodded. "That's exactly what we're here to find out. And Mr. Daniels, we believe there may be more going on than a simple attack. Karen and her son, they don't play by normal rules. We suspect they've manipulated neighbors, hidden threats, and possibly more serious crimes that nobody has discovered yet." John's stomach twisted. More serious crimes? He felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. For years, he had tried to live quietly, follow the rules, and avoid trouble. And yet, here he was, caught in a storm he didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, news of the attack spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, some sympathetic, some afraid to even glance at John and Sarah's home. Some admitted that Karen's family had always been strange, controlling, and intimidating, but nobody had ever imagined violence would reach this level. Late that evening, John received a call from one of the FBI agents. "We've found something," she said in a low voice. "Surveillance, emails, prior complaints. It seems Kevin wasn't acting impulsively. He may have been planning this for weeks. And there's more, your house, your family, it may not have been the only target." John felt the walls of his reality collapse. The attack wasn't random. It was calculated. And if Kevin had been planning for weeks, how many more people had been at risk? As John left the hospital to return home, he noticed his neighbors staring silently from their windows. Some looked worried, some afraid, and some indifferent. But one thing was clear: Karen's influence over the community was deep. And now, with Kevin's actions exposed, everyone was terrified that the next move could be theirs. That night, John sat alone in his wrecked living room, staring at the note that had started it all. The words seemed to burn into his mind: "The rules will be enforced." He didn't know what rules Kevin meant, or how far Karen's family would go, but he understood one thing clearly: the fight was far from over. The calm had ended, the storm was here, and now the authorities were involved. Somewhere outside, in the shadows of the neighborhood, Kevin's presence lingered. John could almost feel his gaze on the house, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And for the first time, John realized that surviving the night was only the beginning. The true battle, for justice, for safety, and for his wife's life, was just starting. The sun had barely risen when John received a call from the FBI agent leading the investigation. Her voice was tense, almost urgent. "Mr. Daniels," she said, "you need to come to our temporary office downtown. We've uncovered something disturbing. Something about Karen and her family that changes everything." John's hands shook as he listened. Disturbing? Changes everything? He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. At the office, a small group of agents gathered around a table, stacks of documents and photographs spread before them. The agent who called him gestured for John to sit. "John," she began, "we've been looking into Kevin's behavior for months. But what we found goes far beyond just a violent outburst. Your neighbors weren't lying. Karen's family has a history of controlling people, threatening neighbors, and hiding serious crimes." John swallowed hard. "Serious crimes?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The agent nodded. "Yes. We found complaints going back years: harassment, intimidation, even property damage. But that's not all. We also discovered financial fraud, evidence that Karen and her family have been manipulating property sales, influencing local officials, and intimidating anyone who disagrees with them." John felt his head spin. He had always known Karen was controlling, but this was on another level.
And Kevin? John asked.
Kevin, the agent said, had been trained, whether consciously or not, to enforce the family's control.
He wasn't acting alone.
Every action he took, every threat, was part of a pattern.
And the attack on Sarah, that wasn't random. It was deliberate. To send a message.
As John tried to absorb the information, the agent slid a photograph across the table. It was old, faded, but unmistakable. Karen, years ago, standing in front of a group of people with an air of authority, her young son Kevin beside her. The caption on the document read, "Previous incidents of intimidation confirmed.
Witnesses silenced."
John stared at the photo, his chest tightening. The realization hit him like a punch. The danger he and Sarah faced wasn't just personal.
It was systemic.
Karen's family had been hiding in plain sight, building influence and fear quietly for years. The agent continued, "We also have reason to believe that Kevin's attacks were planned long in advance. There are emails, messages, and even surveillance showing him monitoring you and your wife.
This wasn't a random outburst. It was strategy." John's mind raced. How could he have missed all the signs?
The way Kevin always watched them, the subtle threats, the chilling note left on their doorstep, it was all part of something much larger.
That evening, John returned home.
The house felt colder than before, heavier somehow, as if the shadows themselves were watching. He moved cautiously through the wreckage, his eyes lingering on every corner, every dark hallway. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or the rules will be enforced again."
John froze.
The handwriting, or rather, the tone, felt all too familiar.
Kevin. Or Karen.
Or both. He realized something terrifying. Even with the FBI involved, he and Sarah were not safe. Their every move, their every attempt to understand what was happening, was being monitored.
And if Karen's family wanted to strike again, they could.
As night fell, John sat beside Sarah's hospital bed once more, reflecting on what he had learned. The woman who had appeared to be just an overbearing neighbor was actually a master manipulator, with a son trained to enforce her control. Their lives, their neighborhood, their sense of safety, all had been illusions. And somewhere, beyond the hospital walls, Kevin was still out there.
Watching. Planning. Waiting. John clenched his fists.
He knew they had two choices: live in fear and be controlled, or fight back, using the FBI's support to uncover the full truth. But the truth came at a price. As John would soon learn, exposing Karen's secrets would not only reveal her crimes but could also put him, Sarah, and anyone who tried to help them in even greater danger. The neighborhood had changed overnight. Where once children played and neighbors chatted casually, there was now silence. Mailboxes stood untouched, cars were hidden in garages, and curtains stayed drawn even in daylight. A heavy tension hung in the air, like the calm before a storm. John drove slowly down the familiar streets, passing homes he had known for years. Every face he saw peeking from behind blinds made him flinch. Fear had wrapped its fingers around the community, and he realized Karen's influence ran deeper than he had ever imagined. "People are scared," he muttered to himself. His voice sounded hollow in the empty car.
Not just of Kevin, but of her. Of all of them.
At home, John found a new note slipped under the door.
This time it was typed, impersonal, yet terrifying. "Do not involve the authorities. Watch your step." He showed it to the FBI agents when they arrived. They frowned, exchanging concerned glances. "This confirms what we suspected," said one agent. "Karen's family is trying to control everyone in the neighborhood. They intimidate, manipulate, and watch. The people here are too scared to speak up, but we can change that." Meanwhile, the tension wasn't just in John's mind. Neighbors whispered about the attack, some sympathetic, some fearful. A few had tried to approach John and Sarah to offer help, but the moment Karen's family appeared, their courage vanished. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who had lived next door for decades, confided quietly to John, "I've seen them do terrible things over the years. They ruin people who cross them. I'm scared, but I couldn't just watch what happened to your wife."
John nodded, realizing that behind every locked door, someone knew Karen's cruelty, but fear kept them silent.
That night, while John sat with Sarah in the hospital, he received an anonymous tip. A short, trembling voice on the phone said,
"Meet me at the old community park at midnight.
Bring no one. I have something you need to see about Karen." John hesitated. It could be a trap.
But his gut told him the information might be crucial. If he was going to protect Sarah and finally put an end to Karen's terror, he had to take the risk.
At midnight, John arrived at the park.
The air was thick with fog, and shadows stretched across the empty playground. He heard footsteps, soft and hesitant, and a figure emerged from the mist. It was a young man, a neighbor he barely knew. His hands shook as he handed John a folder filled with photos, emails, and documents. These are things they've done over the years," the man whispered. "Threats, property scams, blackmail, and Kevin, he's involved in everything. He's not just a son doing his mother's bidding, he's been trained for this." John flipped through the papers, his eyes widening with every revelation. The evidence showed a network of fear. Karen and Kevin had manipulated votes in the HOA, intimidated neighbors into silence, and even sabotaged businesses that refused to comply. They're untouchable," John said, his voice barely above a whisper.
"How have they gotten away with all this?"
The young man shook his head.
"Because everyone's afraid. And now, they know you're awake. Be careful, John. They watch everything. Every step, every move.
If they find out we spoke, they'll come for both of us." John left the park with a heavy heart, the folder clutched tightly in his hands.
The neighborhood wasn't just tense, it was a minefield.
Every house, every shadow, every whisper could hide danger. And somewhere, Kevin was out there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again.
Back home, the note he had received earlier sat on the counter, ominous in its simplicity.
John realized something chilling. Karen and her son didn't just want to scare him, they wanted total control. Over him, over Sarah, over the entire community. But for the first time, John felt a spark of determination. Fear had ruled the neighborhood for too long.
Secrets had been hidden, and silence had protected Karen's tyranny.
If they wanted control, he thought, they were going to find out that not everyone could be intimidated. The tension in the neighborhood was like a living thing, pressing down on everyone. Some would continue to live in fear, some would watch quietly, and some, like John, were beginning to fight back. The sun had barely risen when John received a call from the FBI.
Their tone was sharp, urgent, almost shaking with anticipation. "Mr. Daniels, we have enough evidence now. We're moving in on Karen and Kevin. We need you to stay out of sight. This is bigger than anything we imagined." John's heart pounded. Bigger? How much worse could it get?
He felt a mix of fear and relief. Finally, after weeks of terror, the people controlling their lives would face consequences. By mid-morning, a convoy of black SUVs arrived at Karen's sprawling home. FBI agents, armed but calm, surrounded the house.
Every movement was precise, professional.
John watched from a distance, hidden behind a hedge, clutching the folder he had collected at the park, the proof of Karen's long history of manipulation and abuse. Inside the house, Karen paced, unaware of the operation unfolding. Her sharp eyes flicked to every corner, suspicious, calculating. Kevin moved behind her, silent but tense, like a predator sensing danger.
Neither knew that their entire empire of fear was about to collapse. The FBI agents moved in. A loud, commanding voice echoed, "FBI. Everyone stay where you are."
Karen froze, her composure cracking for the first time. Kevin tensed, instinctively reaching for something, a gun, John realized with horror, but before he could act, agents moved faster than anyone could anticipate. In a flash, Kevin was restrained. Karen's screams filled the air, a mixture of rage and disbelief.
"You can't do this. You don't know what you're doing." An agent held up the folder John had collected.
"We do," she said firmly. "And this proves everything. Your threats, your intimidation, your manipulation of the neighborhood, it ends now." John watched, hidden behind the trees, as the layers of deceit unraveled before him. Photographs, emails, and videos were being catalogued, each piece exposing Karen and Kevin's control over neighbors, property, and even local officials.
Evidence of past attacks, bribery, and blackmail left no doubt Karen's empire of fear was real.
But then something unexpected happened. Karen, ever cunning, began to speak, her voice trembling but sharp.
"You think this is over? You have no idea what my family is capable of. Kevin was just the beginning. The neighborhood, your life, it was never safe.
And you'll never understand the rules that keep everything in order."
Her words were chilling, but the FBI agent ignored her.
They continued their systematic operation, securing the house and detaining both Karen and Kevin. John felt a mix of relief and lingering fear. Even restrained, Karen's words carried a weight, a hint of more secrets lurking in the shadows. Later, in a small office near the house, John met with the lead agent. She opened a folder of evidence collected from Karen's home, hidden cameras, secret ledgers, and even maps detailing the neighborhood.
"John," she said, "you've helped us more than you know. This isn't just about your wife or your house. Karen and Kevin have controlled this community for years. People are afraid to speak up, and some have suffered in silence. With this evidence, we can finally put an end to it."
John nodded, trying to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. The danger wasn't gone. Karen's influence had left deep scars on the neighborhood, and Kevin's training had shown that they could strike unpredictably. But at least now, justice had a chance.
Meanwhile, Sarah was slowly recovering in the hospital.
John visited her, holding her hand and watching her eyes flutter open. Her first words were weak, but filled with strength.
Did they stop them?"
John smiled, tears in his eyes.
"Yes, love. They're gone, but we're not safe yet. We have to be careful.
The rules, they won't forget us." That night, John returned home to find a small, folded piece of paper on the doorstep. His hands shook as he opened it.
It reads simply, "You've won the battle, not the war."
John realized something terrifying. Even with Karen and Kevin behind bars, the shadow of their influence remained. The neighborhood's fear, their secrets, and the ripple effects of their actions weren't so easy to erase. But for the first time in weeks, John felt a spark of hope. The confrontation had revealed the truth. The lies, the threats, and the control had been exposed. And now, with the FBI on their side, he and Sarah had a fighting chance not just to survive, but to reclaim their lives.
The courtroom was quiet, almost eerily so. Weeks had passed since the FBI's operation, and the entire neighborhood was still reeling from the revelations.
John sat beside Sarah, who was now able to sit upright in her wheelchair with a small blanket over her legs. Her body was weak, but her eyes were sharper than ever, alert, cautious, and determined. Karen and Kevin sat across the room, their faces pale but defiant. Karen's eyes darted around, as if searching for allies in the crowd.
Kevin, silent as always, avoided everyone's gaze.
But both were cornered. The evidence was undeniable: emails, photos, videos, witness testimonies, and the secret ledger John had found in the park all painted a clear picture of their long reign of fear and manipulation. The judge cleared his throat. "Karen Thompson and Kevin Thompson, you stand accused of harassment, assault, and multiple other crimes against the residents of this neighborhood.
The court finds you guilty." Gasps filled the room.
Some neighbors cried tears of relief. Others looked stunned, finally realizing that the nightmare that had haunted their community for years was ending.
John felt his chest tighten.
Relief, fear, and exhaustion mixed in a strange cocktail.
He glanced at Sarah, whose lips curved into a faint, weary smile. But before the courtroom could fully settle, a strange murmur ran through the audience. A man in a dark suit stepped forward.
He wasn't part of the FBI or the legal team, he was unknown, yet confident. "I have information," the man said, holding a USB drive in his hand.
Karen and Kevin didn't act alone. Someone has been helping them, hiding evidence, covering their tracks. This will change everything.
The room fell silent.
John's stomach sank. After all the battles, all the danger, the story wasn't over.
The judge motioned to the agents. They quickly examined the USB, their expressions growing darker with every second. Photos, emails, and hidden camera footage revealed something shocking. One of the neighbors, someone John had trusted, had secretly assisted Karen and Kevin. The betrayal cut deep. John realized that the fear he and Sarah had felt wasn't just from Karen and Kevin, it had spread, infecting even those closest to them. Trust had been a weapon, and someone had used it to keep Karen's reign going. John gripped Sarah's hand tightly. "We thought it was over," he whispered. "No," Sarah replied, her voice weak but firm. "It's not over. But we know the truth now. And truth is power." Outside the courtroom, the neighborhood slowly began to breathe again. People whispered to each other cautiously, some expressing relief, others still wary of hidden threats. John and Sarah realized that healing wouldn't be instant. Fear leaves scars, and betrayal leaves deeper ones. But they had survived, and survived together. In the weeks that followed, the FBI worked tirelessly to uncover the full extent of the secret allies' involvement. Some residents were arrested, others cooperated to ensure justice. And while Karen and Kevin were sent to prison, the shadow of their influence slowly faded. At home, John wheeled Sarah to the window, watching the sun rise over the quiet streets. Birds chirped again, and children's laughter could be heard faintly in the distance. It was a fragile peace, but it was peace nonetheless. Sarah turned to John. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. John squeezed her hand. "For now," he said. "But we'll always have to stay alert. The rules, they're not gone. They've only changed." And then, just as they were about to turn away, John noticed a small envelope slipped under the door. His heart skipped. Carefully, he opened it. Inside was a single line, typed neatly. "You've survived this time, but remember, some shadows never disappear." John felt a chill run down his spine. Even with justice served, the story wasn't completely over. Someone, somewhere, was still watching. But as he looked at Sarah, now smiling faintly despite everything, he realized something powerful: they had survived. They had faced unimaginable fear, betrayal, and violence, and still, they were together. And that was the beginning of their true healing. The camera pans out from their home, across the quiet streets, where shadows linger in corners, and the faint outline of a figure watching from a distance disappears into the night. The end, for now.